And then 21, 22, 23 and 24 were part of that same sculpture that we repurposed. And these have got, they're quite heavy, so I don't think... So on two of them, they've got textures, Arbortext into them. Not what I would be doing usually, so a bit of an experiment. They look like a part of something, don't they? So these are following the annual rings one way and the medullary rays the other way. You know, this idea that it's a whole system going through the tree. They've all got annual rings, they've all got medullary rays, and I kind of imagine them a bit like latitude and longitude on the globe. This is from a massive tree again, and I'm looking at the direction of the medullary rays, but this is just from an offcut. Anyway, that's 25. This is 26, is much simpler in that it only follows the annual rings, a bit like the walnut sphere, but it's a bit larger. And these little missing bits, I think there might have been some sapwood on that one, or there might have been some wormholes or some damage. So I've just taken that away, and then that just becomes a feature of the piece. So all the time it's guided by the tree, what the tree gives me, what the wood gives me. The sort of idiosyncrasies of each design are led by the tree and the material. So 27 is very similar to 25, but it's scaled up a little bit, but the same idea. The medullary rays one way and the annual rings the other way. So I'm just following what is in the wood. And those medullary rays look really beautiful on that, how the light catches them. 28 is, I think it's this one. So that's pretty much like 19, following the annual rings, but then I've introduced two lines that are the medullary rays, which are very difficult to see in walnut, but they are there, just to draw attention to the fact that there are lines going the other way, and that's the first two, and to make them more seemingly important, because I haven't covered the whole thing with them. So you really look at it, I think. Yeah, that's the natural shape of the tree. That would have been where the sapwood was, or I've just taken away to one of the annual rings there and just dished it in a bit. So 29 is this one, and that is, you see how different it looks to that, but it's just the same approach. I'm following the annual rings, but that is the development of a little knot somewhere in the tree, and so it pushes the annual rings around. So I've just followed those. Yeah, you've got quite, with that one, I think the colour is quite consistent, whereas here you get the lighter where that little potential knot is, and quite dark to that side, and these colours around here, honeyed or chocolatey colours. Keeping the chainsaw texture and the sort of roughness of the wood feels not normal to me, but it gives the piece a kind of spontaneity when you keep it reasonably rough. But then just to draw attention to the medullary rays and the annual rings with like a little window into the tree. Not being fussy or overworked about the cube, and then doing the real intricate carving into just a little kind of jewel of an area. So that's 30. Yeah, so that's a big milestone because that was the first 30 done. This is 31. So these are up here and not in a box yet because they are still in the process of having the finishing done to them. So this has had probably at least one coat of wax, maybe two. So it's had the linseed oil put onto it and then wax. And then we need to wait in between successive coats of wax to let it kind of soak in, and then you can buff it to give it that sort of sheen. I don't want it to shine like it's got some gloopy kind of varnish on it, but I want a little bit of a sheen. So that's followed the annual rings, and there's a gorgeous little knot there that didn't make it to the outside. Yeah, so that's 31. And 32 is... So these look a bit dull because they've got wax on them, but they haven't been buffed up, so they haven't got that sheen on them. But that is just drawing attention to the annual rings that way. There, it's got 2 annual rings that were picked out there and 2 medullary rays that were picked out that way. So it's like this grid that I'm imagining in the tree. Yeah, so I did that and then thought, well, I'll do half the sphere taken away next. So these are the same idea as the one that I showed you over there, that I was talking about trying something different. The spontaneity of the cube, but then doing something highly worked within it. Every bit of wood has got something amazing happening in it. It's just a question of carving it and showing it. See how there are some gorgeous, the grain there and the medullary rays have done some weird things, dancing about, and that gorgeous little knot there. So that makes that line deviate around the little... 35. So this has got wax on it, so it looks quite dull. It hasn't been buffed up, but you can see this is a giant version of the little spheres that I showed you. The annual rings, concentric rings that way, and the medullary rays going that way. And then that bit that's scooped out, that actually was the outside of the tree. This is where the heart, the centre of the tree was. So the medullary rays are like the spoke of a wheel, of a bicycle wheel coming from the heart. And this would have been the sapwood and the bark. So I removed the sapwood from here, and that gave me a little dish in, which I've accentuated, and then just reversed the texture from being pushing out to pushing in. This is 36. So that was half the little sphere excavated, if you like, to expose that grid. And that's got a gorgeous little row of tiny, weeny, minuscule knots that then have pushed around the annual rings. You see that just ripple through the tree. Yeah, that took quite a long time to do. That did fiddly-dee. So that's 37, the last of those oculus, which actually means a little window architecturally, a little round window into the building. So you can see the annual rings, the concentric rings there, which once I've put this shape into the piece of wood, that annual ring is pushed down there. So that annual ring comes along there and it gets pushed down there. That one comes along, gets pushed down there. Annual ring comes along, pushed down there. And these are the medullary rays that I said are like the spokes of a wheel, and they look like white lines in the wood. In oak, you can see them with your naked eye, but in a lot of woods, they're too fine to see. So you see the medullary ray comes along there and then gets pushed down here. So it comes along and then gets pushed down there. So the medullary rays are where the wood's going to crack in line with those. So you can see already these fine cracks coming. It's changing from being out in the store to coming in here and being worked, especially in that little carving studio. It's nice and warm, so. My feeling was when I'd done that one, it looked a bit neat. You know, I was talking with these cubes about trying to get some spontaneity into the work, because by the very nature of what we do, the carving by hand with the hand tools is labour intensive. It takes a long time, and so the work, you feel the weight of the time and effort that's gone into it, and sometimes the work feels sort of stagnant because of that. So it's trying to put some life back into it, even though we've done something really meticulously. This was done this time last year. That is probably the piece that's had the most time invested. It's got a little base. There are potential branches and knots happening there. This is the main stem of the tree. These are the annual rings that then, when I've taken this shape out, they get pushed down here. So it's just having a bit of fun with where that grid could go. But walnut is such a beautiful wood that you can get a really crisp finish. And because I've carved so deeply, you get these fantastic shadows. Yeah. Yeah. This set here, so I'm classing it as one piece, but there are actually 5 of them. The grain is bonkers there. It's got lots of little knots. And the idea of scorching it is to take away all that colour variation, to make it homogeneous, the same, so that you look at those cracks and the directions of them and see the busyness of it without the complication of the colour. Kind of look like cannonballs, don't they? If the texture runs off the edge, as if somebody just chopped a piece off, you know, like this is part of a much bigger thing, and somebody's just come along and taken a chunk out, it's much more interesting, I think, and livelier. You know, that's kind of closed finish. It's a finished thing. It's done and gone. Whereas these are like experiments or trials. There's something more to happen. These are 10 of the 60. So there are individually 7. There's 1 too many there, and then 2 pairs and a triptych. So these are cast from the sphere that's about 1.2 metre diameter, and they're like little snippets of information from what we've carved, or what I've carved. So there's so much time invested in doing one piece. It's like, surely we can get something more from doing the original. It can give us information that's interesting in its own way. And the point of doing it white is just to maximise the light and shade. That's the opposite end of the spectrum, to just be simplifying the information we're taking in so we can focus on one thing, which is the light and shade. And I think what is really successful with these is the fact that the silicone mould has picked up the cracks of the timber. So you've not just got the carving, you've got the cracks that were coming. And if you look really carefully, you can see the vessels of the annual rings. So you can see the summer growth and the spring growth. So those silicone moulds picked up a lot of information. This is 54, 55, 56 and 57, although ideally it would be sold as one piece because they obviously relate to each other because they're from the same plank, the same piece of wood that's been cut up into blocks. This is very much one that runs together. And the idea was that it would be an undulating surface that sort of echoes the landscape, so the South Downs and the foothills of the South Downs, but it relates to the big reception desk that we did for LA. This is a scaled down version, so that's the opposite way round to how sculptors would normally work. You'd make a maquette, a model, and then scale up for your actual piece, but this is, I wanted to do a small version of that front face of the reception desk because I enjoyed the shapes that it made, and with the added undulating of the surface, it just throws the shadows around more, and it pushes the medullary rays so they're not running parallel on the face, they're actually going into the valleys and over the hills. So it accentuates the grid, it pushes the grid around all over. And then you've got little areas like here, which are the development of knots, which have got their own annual rings and medullary rays. So the final three are all, just put them up there, 3 little walnut spheres. These are kind of the full circle of the process of 1 to 60, taking a few risks and pushing on artistically what I do. So I tried to just simplify everything. That this is really quite complex. So for these last 3 pieces, I was just thinking, well, what is it that's important about this little piece? What do I want to say? And it just became about following those annual rings. Like, why do I need to do all the annual rings? Can we not just focus in and just show where those annual rings go? So the annual rings are going round the sphere like this, but because I've taken out a depression, they're forced to sweep across. There it catches back up and comes round here and joins up over there. So it's just a little comment to draw your attention to annual rings in the wood, keeping it simple. And then of course I had to complicate it again by constantly trying to simplify things and get to the essence of what you're trying to say, but then I've complicated it again and put 2 faces that are taken out. So then you've got the added difficulty of taking the line, not just where they're all going around the sphere, the annual rings, and then pushed around this first dishing in, but then it catches the difference in direction for this area that's been taken out and pushes it right round like that. So it's just playing with those annual rings and chopping off parts of the sphere to say, oh look, little observations I'm drawing your attention to. So then it was like, stop complicating it, get back to what all this is about. So just one annual ring, and there was a beautiful little knot on the surface. So that I was choosing that so that the annual ring would deviate around it. But by the time I dished out that sort of depression, the knot disappeared. And then it was like, no, it doesn't need the knot. What you're trying to talk about with the annual rings, it doesn't need the knot. And actually, I'm really pleased with it for its simplicity and the way it draws your attention to that line. And yeah, I've put these little flat faces, which is a new thing on the bottom, which at one time I would have thought, oh no, that's dictating where, you know, you want to hold it, but it does dictate how it sits. So it felt really satisfying to get that finished. Not because only because it was 60, but because, I mean, those things you've pointed out, like to keep a circle looking like a circle is difficult. And to get these curves to look right, that don't have a sort of little flats, a circle made out of little flats rather than a graceful curve. That's all really quite difficult. It's a tooled surface with a very sharp chisel just taking off a tiny little scallop out with a very shallow gouge, so that by the time Kate's buffed it after the waxing, it almost looks like planished metal, like metal that's been beaten.